All right, high school ceramics. Today we are going to talk about how to make the lid line for your personality slab boxes. You have two choices. You can make it vertical, you can make it a horizontal. If you look at my example, this was an example of the horizontal lid line, okay? I laid it down on one of the rectangular sides and then drew my line through there. When you're making your lid line, two things to think about. It needs to be at least as low as 2-finger thickness from your last slab, okay? So for example, if I'm holding my fingers here, you can see my line didn't start before that. Why? Because you're gonna have a lid and you're gonna have the thickness of the slab to consider. You can't be cutting through a solid slab. You have to be cutting through the opening where the slabs combine, okay? So the second thing you need to think of is draw it first and cut it later. If you cut all the way through, you're not really going to be able to go back very easily. So please, please, please draw it first. Let me check. Okay? And a third thing, which I didn't mention, but I'm going to mention, make sure you have a key. So you can see I put this kind of triangular shape in on this end so that way I know how the box goes back together. Okay? You can see it here. I had kind of a wavy line there. Okay, so there's an example of if you're going to lay it down and cut the line horizontal. Here I'm going to make an example of cutting it in the vertical way. Make sure you have both of your ends attached. Okay, that was the last video. So now I'm going to carry on with the next step. You can also make your lid lower than a 2-finger length. It depends on if you want a deeper box or if you want the lid to have a little bit more shape. So for example, if I put my fingers here, I'm lining up my middle finger with the top edge of the slab, and I'm just going to make a little mark there, okay? So I have to have it be at least that far down. If you want it to be farther than that down, that's fine, as long as you're not above that little line, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and go down about here, because I just want a lid to be a little bit bigger, since I'm going to make it vertical and I have more room now, okay? So I'm taking my modeling knife. I'm going to start by first marking it, which I did, and I am now going to draw ever so gently. Okay, making sure to never go above that mark line all the way around. Okay, I'm going to put a little key here, so I'm continuing to draw my line around. I'm just making a simple triangle shape. The simpler the better with your lids, okay? Try not to do like a crazy zigzag pattern. You're gonna have to cut all of that out and then also smooth it and make sure it lines up. So it is better if you keep it simple. There can be some slight waves as you're going around. You can put a key in here and there like I just did. But the simpler you keep it, the easier time you're gonna have. And then when you get to your last place, make sure it lines up with your starting. Okay, so hopefully you can see now. There, this one's pretty simple. I have a nice little hill here. I have a little triangle here. That's what I'm gonna call my key, because I can know if I get that triangle lined up, then the rest of it is on there correctly. Please let me see this when you have it done. The reason we only draw it is because if I don't like this, it's not cut all the way through. I can simply take my finger and smudge that line away and then redraw it. Okay, so really, it's just the simplest, best way to do it. Okay, after I have checked your lid line and I've made sure it is not too high or too low and that it's not too complicated, you are then going to take your modeling knife, hold this ever so gingerly in your hand, and I'm going to start cutting all the way through. In order to make sure it's all the way through, your modeling knife should go up to about where those little notches are, because it's the same thickness as your clay. Okay? When I'm doing this, I poke it all the way through and I try to, if you can, draw in a straight line without doing that zigzag kind of chopping motion, because then you're really going to have rough ends to deal with. So if you can keep it moving in a straight line, it's going to be a lot easier and cleaner for you when you remove your lid space. It's very much like carving a pumpkin in this way, except for without the sawing motion. But I am trying to make sure I go all the way through the wall thickness. Okay? And be gentle that you're not like squeezing your clay box here as you're going through and doing this either, because you don't want to warp it. Okay, I have now made it all the way through. The biggest problem you might have is that your corners didn't cut all the way through because that's the thickest because you have two slabs coming together there. So go ahead and give it a gentle wiggle, and if you've gotten all the way through, it should come up relatively easy. Okay, so here's how I have it. All right. As you can see, it's very important you have your little key there because otherwise it's tricky to know what hill goes where. Okay, so now, very gently, I'm going to set this down. Just going to kind of set this up a little and take your brush. You can have it really dry if you want. You can have the brush to have a little bit of slip on it, but I wouldn't do a lot because what you don't want to do is change your edges here. You want to keep them as close to what they were when you cut them as you can so that it lines up nicely. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to this. All I'm doing here is cleaning out the burrs and smoothing the edge. Okay, so just using my paintbrush there. Like I said, try your best not to alter this much, like don't push the wall out or anything, because you do that, when you go to put your lid back on that was cut, it's not gonna line up then. So I'm trying not to shift the walls. I'm trying to simply smooth any places that are sharp or have burrs on them from when I cut. Okay. And because your clay is still soft, you can adjust slightly if you need to when you put this lid back on. Okay. All right, now from this point on, you can reach things a little easier. You might want to take your slip brush and, like, for example, where that lid came together, you can see it's not very neat there because, well, that was when I was closing the box. And after you put the lid on, you can no longer clean those edges. So that's what I'm going to do now that I can access those corners again. I'm taking my paintbrush and I'm smoothing out any places those slabs have come together. This is just another one of those craftsmanship things. And it also will make it 10 times easier when you want to glaze the inside of these if they're not rough. So take the time to clean your seams. Okay. Now, if this is all the farther you get for your first day, that's probably expected. Hopefully you have your lid cut. When you put these back together, as in you're cleaning up for the day, do not just stick the lid on top of there because they're gonna stick together because the clay is still soft. So I usually take a little bit of paper towels and I just tear them in like little 1-inch sections. And what I'm gonna do is very gently place those little 1-inch sections on each wall. Okay. Okay, so I have one paper towel on each of my 4 walls. Again, because I have my nice key, I can quickly see how this goes back together. Okay, and our hope is there that those little paper towels just give you enough separation so that when it's time to come back and continue working on this the next day, they are not totally stuck together and we can pry the lid back off more easily. Okay, so then when you're done, again, wrap it back up in the bag. Our next day we will learn about handles and different techniques you can use to decorate your box.